What's up, Warren? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. Thanks, Will.
Cool. I cut my intro a little shorter this week because I just kind of assume, and maybe this is a bad assumption on my part, that people know which podcast they're listening to because they had to click on it, and so I felt like it was kind of redundant to say, "Welcome to the Adventures in DevOps podcast."
Yeah, but you just did it. So
right? That was subtle, though, right?
Yeah, right.
That was clever. I'm gonna just pat myself on the back for that one.
Yeah, nice job there. I've got actually an interesting fact that I can share, so we can jump into that. There was an OTP provider that actually changed hands, similar to the XC vulnerability and compression in Linux not too long ago. And for those of you that don't know what OTP is, that's one-time password. So you can think of like an auth app that you've got installed in your phone. And it's sort of ridiculous that this even happened, because if you think about how bad it is for a open source library to get co-opted by a malicious attacker, to have an application on your phone that is also responsible for security, for two-factor auth codes to change hands, means that provider now has access to every single one of those users' two-factor auth, and it could be even primary factor if it comes to password resets or whatnot. So that's a great way of stealing credentials. And I don't think it's an attack vector that a lot of people think about. I think they, it's like, whatever, it just stores my two-factor codes, doesn't really matter. But now there's actually a huge problem that could come up because of that.
Nice. I look forward to it. I'm just excited about that.
I think everyone really has to switch over to WebAuth, and that's the true secret. And if you don't know what that is, come and talk to me after the show. I'm happy to give everyone an earful about that.
Or can we just give up on it and just everyone uses password all lowercase letters for their password? I mean, there's some credibility to that approach, right?
There's a whole episode there in itself, I think, that I
maybe. Maybe, but today's episode, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, incident response and on-call management. And to chat through that topic with us, we've got Philippe Jain, the CEO of Pagerly, joining us today. Philippe, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to join on this and have a great discussion about incident response and on-call stuff.
Right on. Cool. I feel like incident response is a learned skill, and it's learned on the job, under pressure, when everything's going to hell. And prior to your first incident, you never even thought through that this is where your life was going to lead. So how did you end up starting a company dedicated to this incident response?
It began with when I just started out my first job, basically, and I was part of Amazon and in the detail page team, which is primarily one of the highest sort of pages in terms of traffic, if you consider. And that was the first hand experience. My manager put me on call within sort of months of joining, and he told me hey, this is the best way to learn about things. And I kid not, that was some serious pressure, I would say, in the initial, at least in the initial stuff. And since then I've always believed, this is the best way to sort of learn things, because you are absolutely learning each and every bit of things in the shortest possible amount of time. So I think that was my first, I would say, interaction with the incidents and the on-call world.
Well, let's be realistic there. Your manager's thought process was actually, if this guy's going to quit, I'm going to make him quit sooner rather than later. So I'm putting him on call right at the beginning.
It could be. I think it was probably, just telling me, hey, this is how you test waters here. But yeah, it was pretty sort of a new world. Before that, I always thought software development is more about, building stuff and, maybe designing it. This part is truly what we say of management, or maintaining your product. And that was the first kind of interaction I had with this.
Right on. Cool. So then you went from Amazon. After that, you went to Disney, right?
Yeah. So I think in Amazon, it was pretty interesting, detail page and there were sort of quite a few days, especially during Prime Days and Cyber Mondays, and the Christmas week is always like pretty high pressure stuff. And I remember each and every one of them, like in terms of the events, like even if there's like a small blip, there's like I think so many teams on a single bridge in even in different locations, and everyone just giving their status updates each and after time. And it was like it was almost like I would say like a war room. People I think have now started to tagging on-call rooms as war rooms, like everyone giving their status updates and what's the update, and it go on for quite a few nights. So that was I think like pretty interesting. In the Disney, it was on the other way around. Like our major events in Disney were the live streaming. So in India, we had cricket as the major sport, and we used to live stream cricket, and we had around 20 million concurrent viewers also at some point of time. And with that scale, each and every bit of system, from starting from web to CDN, even to a load balancer, even to a small Kubernetes file, to even to maybe our caching systems, everything gets tested a lot. So for us in Disney, that was our major priority. How to manage our on-calls response, incident response, and on-calls during the live streams, because we cannot even afford to go for a minute down, because we know how much stake the live events are for the company.
Well, so, especially when you're talking about like live streaming cricket to Indians, because y'all take that seriously.
Yeah. We, the broadcast contracts are for billions of dollars, and if we go down for a couple of minutes, we're literally losing money at every point of time. And we can see the Twitter, we're just trending on Twitter, hey, like your app is down, what's happening and what's not. So we need to be very, very careful, how to respond publicly also, and how to, quickly bring things up in a way that it can last at least during the live windows. So those were like, I'd say the most, the closest I can be up to a customer at that point of time. And the most engineer can be at a highest pressure point. So that was my Disney stint, and post that I've started out with PagerDuty.
Right on. Yeah. So I think after that, you're kind of committed at this point. Your career path is now incident response after those two stints.
Yeah. So interestingly, I think the two companies had slightly a different way of handling response, maybe because of the company size or team sizes. But overall, I think that the concept way, like everyone was leading to a single sort of a goal where we wanted to reduce the same incidents again and again, at least. That's our primary goals. And I see what I saw in the two stints, like the primary part of the incident response is the process, like how do you sort of set up the processes, how do you enable your engineers to follow these processes and assist them. I think like as an engineer, as a developer, that's why we call on-call like as an operational part. Nobody wants to spend a lot of time on it. Like everyone wants to maybe code, develop features, maybe even design, architect, even blog nowadays. But on-call is the last part, like everyone wants to spend time. And so most grunted work, especially if they are like, work after work related to bugs or incidents. So that's where I saw a lot of common patterns across, incident response, even in the on-call management. I saw there can be a lot of tools or automations or even assistant agents which can help the engineers. So that's why I kind of started with PagerDuty, which is helping the teams to assist their incident and on-call management.
Yeah, I think that's a solid point that's often overlooked. I work a lot with early stage startups, and it's a pattern I've seen over my career. Like the biggest part of incident response happens before you ever have your first incident, because you have to talk through, like, what are we going to do when this actually happens? Who are we going to bring on? How are we going to carry out communications? And so, yeah, I think that's a solid point. I like the fact that you mentioned that there's multiple ways of doing that. You know, there's not one right way.
Right. So there, I would say, like, the first part is, like, you need to sort of realize, a time has come in my organization that we need to have this setup. What I've usually seen I would say 90% of the times it comes down from the top leadership. If you have like CTOs or VPs, depending on the organization size, if those folks have come from a place where incident response or on-call processes had been in place, they bring that culture into the company because they have realized value over the time of these processes. In companies where they have not, like, usually organization take a longer time to realize, we need such processes. So that's the first part, is to realize, like, hey, these are the processes we need so that we can at least, reduce our issues in a longer frame of time. So that's the first part. The second part is then to set up that on-call roster. So on-call roster is something like, now that is something which is very dependent on org to org. Some organization wants to have a centralized on-call team, which kind of handles everything. Like, let's say, even if it's like a web issue, they do it. Even if it's like an infrastructure issue, they handle it. And people have, different ways of setting them. Maybe like one person from each team, or just one person every week, and they do it. Some organizations have dedicated on-call team for each of their separate teams. So, and they kind of rotate in weekly, bi-weekly, monthly manner. So that's the other part. The second part is to set the on-call roster. And I think then organization takes some time until the on-call rosters get settled and they start, debugging tickets. And after some certain amount of time, then they go into the setting up the incident response part, which is the postmortems, as well as, figuring out, hey, like, these are the sort of our general kind of, steps we take to solve an issue. These are the certain workflows that we do. Now let's try to streamline this both in the response as well as in the postmortem process, as well as in the postmortem analysis. So that's what we have seen organization go from step A to last part is the postmortems.
You said something really interesting, I think, which is, I haven't worked at any company so far, and even my own at Authors here, we have some process. It isn't like we don't do anything when that happens. And maybe it's because we're a tech-focused or software-focused company, and that's pretty much where I've worked. But the part that you said that was really interesting for me is that software engineers don't like on-call. And, I want to challenge that, or like, I want to live in the world where it's not a problem. It's like, why do people not like it so much? Any thoughts about that?
Because people, as engineers or developers, they don't consider as part of the building process. Like, we love to build, we love to, architect things. But once we have done that, like, then we don't want to sort of, go in and, fix out just one tiny part of it, which is actually causing the major issue. But going there, fixing part of it, and probably, just taking blame also, because sometimes people kind of have that kind of bias also. Like, hey, my product is like bug free, or my product is like, super great. So and going there and fixing this, as well as, you already have a lot of other work going on. You have sprints and in this agile world. So that's where that's where software developers don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So that's what happens.
You think it's not like well prioritized or rewarded? Like, if you do on-call work, you're not rewarded for it. If you write bugless code, you're not rewarded for it. So, whatever, I don't want to do it. It's going to happen, and then I have to pay the fine because of it, and I don't get the benefit.
Yeah, I think, like, benefits and all, like, can probably be defined by the engineering managers or team leads if they want to sort of reward, or they want to highlight, maybe, like, hey, the person has solved these many tickets, these many incidents, or maybe find a better way of, rewarding developers who actually solve a lot of incidents. But yeah, I think like in general sense, like since it's not part of the building, it's more on the maintenance part. That's the I think the major belief. Software developers don't like incidents.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah, I don't like on call because it's never my code. It's always something else.
Yeah,
I mean, that makes me think there's something. Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, I feel like there's something fundamentally broken there. Like I've seen that where I worked at one of the previous jobs that was 20, 50 engineers that were all rotating through the same on-call schedule, as if somehow code, just because it was all in the monolith, if something was broken, I somehow would magically know what was going on in, say, I don't know, products or logistics code when I had nothing to do with the development of it. Like it might as well be like some foreign, like I don't know, Aramaic or cuneiform to me. Like I have no idea what that was going on there at all, and yet somehow I have to come in and debug or find out what the problem was.
Right. Yeah, I think like, in Amazon this was a case like. There's like the entire, I would say, the detail page was kind of at that point of time like that, and that particular sort of service or page is like maintained by more than 150 software engineers, and so like most of the times you are debugging something that you have not coded. So and you're debugging, let's say 3 a.m. in the night, and you're already frustrated, like you don't know what's happening. So that's why I think some bit of frustration do come from. And that's why I think like good processes can sort of somehow mitigate some of the pain points, especially like institutions like this.
Was the expectation at 3 a.m. that software engineers should be able to log on and identify the problem and push out a fix? Like that seems like there's something that would never actually have actually worked out in practice.
It did like so like it kind of depends. So what kind of systems that you have in place. So one part is to maybe mitigate. Sometimes mitigation can be done just to maybe revert a last deployment. That's the one mitigation people generally have. But let's say even that is not done, you probably need to sort of page the person who has probably added that line of code and take help from him or her, or you maybe have certain like a IMOC team or something like that, which can sort of orchestrate and collaborate with a lot of different on-calls, different developers to sort of mitigate and put like a patch or fix the issues right there. So this kind of like depends on how you have set up that incident response process itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction to make there. That like during an incident, oftentimes the primary goal is to mitigate the problem, which is different than solving the root cause of the problem. So like if we're on an outage or an incident, like we might mitigate the problem by launching, 15 more Kubernetes pods with just insane amounts of memory just so we can ride through the problem till we're able to figure out the root cause and test that theory and then deploy a fix for it.
So just so I got you right, Will, your strategy for incident management is turning it off and back on again.
Absolutely. 3 times. Always reboot 3 times.
Yeah, I think like in live stream, one of the major kind of our last hack was to just put the live stream on and don't have a paywall or something like that. So that can be one, or even in Amazon, kind of different scenarios that you can set. Like, okay, even if fixing is taking time, even if mitigation is taking time, maybe do something. Maybe just put that add to cart button there. There was a certain process that you had in place. So as you said, like just increase the Kubernetes pods, and at least your customer is not facing that issue for the moment. And then use that time to mitigate to actually fix the issue.
How do you decide what mitigation strategy makes the most sense? Like if you I feel like we're in the case of the world now where we're going to automate whatever it is. So if we have some number of failures, do we just immediately start deploying extra pods? Do we immediately try to roll back to a previous code version? Like, can we even know up front what the right approach is there to automate? Because the last thing I want, I feel like, is someone to get online and after half an hour be like, you know what, maybe we should deploy some pods with an insane amount of memory that will solve all of our problems.
Yeah. I think like it's interesting. It was like like as a engineer, like even if you have some familiarity, you would know, okay, like probably this is the issue. Let's say if you're seeing a memory leak, then pod increase makes a sense. But let's say if there's a something else, like you're seeing a lot of 5x6. Now, probably the pod increase might not make a sense there. Probably reverting to a previous version might make a sense there. So I think you need to have some bit of familiarity, with whatever system that you are handling it. In case you're not, then it becomes like a huge challenge. As saying, then you probably don't know, what to do. So I think some familiarity is needed at least to have that first mitigation step, at least in mind.
I think that alludes to an entire skill set in software engineering of how to troubleshoot.
Yes.
It's because like debugging when you're writing code is completely different, I think, than troubleshooting a live system and all of its different dependencies and trying to figure out where the potential problem might be and how do you get some faith in that theory and then do something to mitigate it.
Yeah. I think like couple of techniques that we have seen and we have kind of deployed. One is maybe do a shadow on call. Like you do on calls. Like someone is handling the on call, but let's say if there are major incidents, you shadow them so that like these are tools. Like even I've seen sometimes people don't even know like these are dashboards that you can refer to and which will probably help you more. So reaching out to people, shadowing them definitely helps, especially whenever there's an incident or an issue in a system which you have not yet touched. So that is one. Other bit is what we had done was we had done Chaos Monkey a lot. So Chaos Monkey, like a concept, I think probably generated in Netflix engineering team that you kind of have like game days where what you do is like certain infrastructures you just put it down. Let's say you put it down like a replica of let's say Postgres DB, and see how your engineering team is performing after that. How much time they are just taking to mitigate or at least mitigating the issue. What's their MTTR? How they're fixing it? How they're communicating? How they're collaborating? Are they putting the right communication to the right stakeholders at the right time? So those kind of events, those kind of practices have helped, especially when you have not done for a long time. So Chaos Monkey helped us a lot, especially prepping for large events, and especially having a proper collaboration sync with other teams, because that's also what is needed. You do it within your team, but you also have to do it with, let's say, your maybe front end team or maybe your DevOps team. You need to do in sync to mitigate an issue sometimes. So there are techniques to do that, so that like right context and right information also is like the right education is also done for whoever is coming on to.
I often wonder how much these things provide value, like where along the spectrum is the right time to start implementing, say, a game day where you're taking your own stuff down, or the Simian army to inject faults into your architecture or infrastructure. Like I see a lot of companies that I could say, hey, you know what? That's probably not the highest value thing. Yeah. Like they have so many other problems that I think they should tackle first before they're ready to do that. But then on the opposite side, I'm thinking, wait, like if they did this, they may actually identify critical problems within their infrastructure that could cause them multi-day downtimes or multi-week downtimes, which would have more catastrophic impacts in the long term. I don't know. Is that interesting? Any thoughts about that?
I think like of course, like a company at a startup stage or initial stages where they maybe don't have a lot of customers, or that's they won't be doing this. Even if I say I think like once you have started having multiple teams, multiple engineering teams, let's say different pods kind of a system where sometimes the information is scattered between teams, and you don't know, like when a fire is there, you don't know who to say, like who to contact. And that's the beginning of it. And as slightly, I think the teams start to mature and the companies start to mature. I think that's the right time to sort of start these processes.
Yeah, I think maturity is really the key word there, because it takes You have to have multiple layers of maturity there. You have to have a product that's mature enough to be tested, but you also have to have maturity in your leadership team where they recognize and understand the value of saying, hey, we're not shipping new features this week. We're not shipping shiny new buttons. We're actually going to take the time and effort to see what it takes to break our system.
Yeah, I think probably a company having a launching new things or launching a new product in maybe a week or so. I think people do dog fooding. They can add this maybe an incident response or as a part of it, so that how your team would be reacting on day 0, 1, and 2. So, I think it generally sometimes even the managers or the management kind of starts to realize, hey, now we are spending a lot of time on these incidents itself. Our delivery for other important stuff is also getting impacted. So now we should find time to set some process time for this, so that we get these incidents get at least mitigated, so that we can have a longer time for our own features also. It's always about finding that right balance. Even engineering managers, or I believe, have a tough time to sort of sometimes justify spending a lot of time for these kind of things. It's always, I think that's probably their always conundrum they are in. Which part to spend time on. So I think they have to take such decisions at the end.
I'm stifling, maybe laughing here, because I feel like I have so many previous traumatic experiences of some sort of on-call event. That's on one side. The other side, you said, it's oh, well, the product manager needs to prioritize it effectively. I'm I want to hire that PM that actually is what, our incidents are impacting our, future profitability. So we should actually take a look at it, improving ours. So I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone on that side ever say that. It's always the other way. Oh, we don't need to worry about that. It's done, right? Didn't we finish that code and push it out? We don't need to improve it anymore.
I think the first part is always about having that right report or having some sort of information so that you can act. Maybe hey, these are incidents. These are repeatable incidents. These are probably, if you have some sort of a business impact to it, maybe show them their numbers and say this is the impact. And if you want to sort of reduce that numbers of business impact, then we need this process. I think, as you said, it's always a hard time to justify spending time on these things. But if you have that data would be, I think, anyway useful.
I mean, this is where Dora is super successful, where we come in with mean time to resolution and change failure rate. And so falling back on those statistics can be really helpful in the conversation to convince people that these aren't industry standard that we have. Every single pull request we push out results in a bug in production.
That's job security, right?
Right.
I would imagine that most companies' onboarding experience to incident response is a result of hitting a breaking point where they've had just outage after outage after outage, and finally they're like, okay, we have to do something different, which is probably what leads them to you. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. I think one is what you said, having outages after outages, and the other part is, even if, let's say, they want to sort of streamline some process, usually they see maybe on-call is confused what to do, or maybe the on-call is late to react, or the manager doesn't know what's happening, or someone doesn't even know how to report an incident, for example. So there are different aspects to it. I always say I think the entire incident response is part of two parts. One is the trigger, or how you're creating that incident, what's the trigger for that, and then how you're responding to that, which is debugging, communicating, and then the post-mortem of it. So that's where we kind of try to come in, sort of can streamline that entire pipeline of it, make it as quick as possible, make it visible across maybe stakeholders, maybe support, across engineering teams, and having that post-mortem analysis processes in place. So I think we come in when teams recognize too many repeated incidents or too many of these stuff, and whoever is the on-call is kind of feeling very confused about the state of things. So that's where we have seen a lot of companies reaching out to us.
Yeah, you mentioned the stakeholders there, and I think that's a really cool thing to dive into for a minute, because communication is one of the key things of incident response, and it's the one I always hated the most early on in my career, because I would be in an incident and then everyone wants to know what's going on. Well, I'm working on it, damn it, but I can't work on it if you're sitting here hounding me with questions. And so I think a key part of a solid incident response plan is having a communication plan so that you can relay that information out and free up the people actually working on the incident to continue working on it. How do you recommend addressing that?
Like I would say, like an on-call is a person who is always on fire, who has to, mitigate the issue. I think that's the number one priority. And everyone recognizes that. But because of the environment, he needs to do a lot of other things also. Communicate to the customer support also, what message of what's the estimated time of resolution. Probably communicate to product manager, like, hey, this is probably the impact. Like, maybe these many users, this much subscriptions are being impacted right now. So that's the major pain point the on-call person has. What's the way? The best way is to, delegate a lot of these stuff, or maybe have a system which is, which is visible to the stakeholders, so that they don't ping the on-call, or they don't kind of, ask him again and again, hey, what's the update? One of the ways we do via Pagerly is we leverage Slack as a major part of the incident response. So let's say we create a Slack channel for each incident. And in the Slack channel, you can see, what's the ET, what's the business impact, or maybe some bit of information. This is like some bit of it is updated by the on-call, but nobody is like asking the on-call again and again, hey, what's the ETA, what's the impact? Let's say a product manager wants to see, they can go to the channel and see it. Customer support can see it. So like whatever, or let's say if someone wants to send an email, no one, like with Pagerly, like they can just send all that information with email also, whatever the stakeholders that the company has. So whatever kind of the actions on-call has to do apart from mitigation is an additional effort, and whatever tools and resources they can utilize to sort of delegate and automate it would be much more helpful, and so that his major sort of brain focus is always on mitigating the issue as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think having those additional things in place once you identify them to help streamline the process are super important.
Yeah.
Like we've got status dashboards that we can point customers to immediately. So rather than trying to explain where the updates are going to be or how they're going to happen, and you just go to this URL and stuff is there. But I mean, I think also as customers of SaaS solutions, we have an opportunity to even be nicer to companies that are having incidents. I mean, I think there's an emoji dedicated to this, hug ops, right? When something's happening, pass on the empathy a little bit. Like I care way more about as a customer that you tell me that that there's a problem that someone's looking at, rather than being like, oh, we don't know. I don't know what's going on. Or, even someone's looking at it. Like I much prefer to be told, oh yeah, like we'll have an update in an hour than, oh, this is exactly what's happening at this moment. Like, I don't care about that. I want to know, when's the next update going to be happening, more so than play by play.
Right. Like there are two, I'll say like always there are two types of communication, one internally and externally. Both has to be, I think, correct. Externally more because you have the you have the ultimate stakeholders there. But like both needs to be, always updated. Both needs to be, always to the point. So that because in any of these communication, if there's any miscommunication happening, then it will, just prolong the incident much longer. So I totally agree with you.
It reminds me of the AWS status pages early in the days of AWS, was always green. Like I would have put money that it was just a green icon there and there were no other options available because it was always green.
Right. I remember at that time, I think I usually didn't sort of had a lot of confidence on that. like down detector or some other, or even Twitter was much more sort of a better way to know, okay, there's a like actually a major issue there, and those status pages were like not at all properly. Like I think things have changed, but not up to that mark.
You bring up Twitter though, and that's a really good point. I mean, I think for a lot of tech-oriented companies, that's a primary communication channel. Sending out notifications on Twitter or X, and relaying information that way. And also, like, it's kind of sad to say, but that's also a good notification method of whenever your customers think something's going on wrong.
It was. But I mean, enough that I saw some products that specifically are like, we go around to social media and get the real-time status from potential users complaining, because it's another source that you're not tapping into to actually let you know if customers have a problem. They're not necessarily reporting it back to you. This is their report mechanism.
Right.
I think Down Detector, these tools kind of work that way.
That's a good point.
And I think the companies, have started to put RSS feeds also, like I think for a longer time, and I think they have integrations with those feeds onto their Twitter accounts, or maybe some other tool, let's say Discord, if they are doing like a SaaS kind of a product or something like that, so that like their customers are also updated via these platforms.
I mean, accuracy though is what you're bringing up, Will, and I feel like there's a huge challenge there, realistically, to like what makes sense to even talk about, and what should be intermittent hidden failures from an internal company standpoint. Like, I don't want to see Amazon just being read all the time because some node in CloudFront failed one request because the connection didn't go through. Like, how does that help? So, I mean, I feel like, or yellow all the time because there's always something that's probably, possibly problematic. So I think a single color there is wrong, is always wrong.
Right. I think and that's why I think if you see AWS, they have, over the period of time, they have evolved their status page. Earlier, like now they have actually region-wise also. I think they are also started to do for some of the services, they have started to do more granular scoping as much as possible. So like, let's say even for Slack also, like earlier they used to do only for messages, if your workspace is working fine. They have now started to do for APIs, and like even login has been different. So every bit of different they have started to, so that like you don't have a yellow for maybe just a small issue or maybe just a small service in a small region. So if that detail page is more, if that status page is more sort of detailed, then I think it probably helps to sort of give the right information.
I mean, I actually think AWS went a lot further here. They have something called the health dashboard, which figures out what services you're actually using and how that could be impacted you, and then actually have messages there, which I mean is really what we all actually care about, right? Is there something happening at this moment which actually affects us that could be interesting? Realistically, if we saw a problem, does this explain it? Right.
Absolutely.
So one thing we haven't talked about a lot is the postmortem, and I feel like that's that is as much work as doing the incident response itself, but sometimes gets overlooked because it's no longer a priority. Like, once the incident is no longer an incident, you have to just be disciplined enough to run through the postmortem process. Yeah. How do you approach that?
I mean, like, the postmortem is like, I would say, like a cherry on top in terms of the grunt work. Like, you have, you are doing a sleepless night, you're going through the incident, you have maybe fixed it also, but now, you need to present like postmortem. And like at Disney, we used to have like a day, max to max a day, or even less than a day to, come with that postmortem document, because they were kind of very bullish on that. Like, hey, like, we want to know, what caused the issue, so that like we can fix it by tomorrow itself. So that like I would say, like, that's where the gap is. Like, that's where a lot of people drop, where they don't want to do that work, especially after a grueling period of incident resolving process. So, but I think it's just about more of an education part, or more of a realizing what you have learned from your incident resolving part. Like, you have probably a team has resolved a lot of incidents, but if they have not learned anything from that, then it's pretty much wasteful, because tomorrow similar or probably same incident would occur probably in a different team, or in your team itself. So like I think the value of the postmortem needs to be told pretty clearly, and it's a very clear proposition. I always feel like if you tell the engineer, if you tell like hey, what we don't want is to you spending this much amount of time again on a similar thing next week. So that's where postmortem can help. So I think telling that value is pretty much it's important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really big values of using an incident response tool is it will collect all of those data points and help you more easily see that you're having this common failure over and over again. That otherwise, if you're just tracking this in like Google Docs or whatever, you wouldn't actually see that correlation.
Yeah, I think it needs to start with what information you are filling. So like even majorly what we kind of help is to do the 5 whys. What went well, first of all, what happened, then what went well, what did not go well, what we can do to mitigate or in future. So like having those information in place is pretty much is the first step, so that you have the right way to analyze stuff. Even the timelines part. So if you have if you want to do the Slack conversations, or if you want to do want to see what happened from when this incident was triggered till the resolve, that timeline also helps you a lot, so that where a lot of time was being spent, or if there's a like a gap in the communication process, that is also kind of visible from there. Or what are the tickets or what the action items that you have created out of it. So there are, like I'd say, a lot of information in that postmortem document that can help you to analyze a lot of things. And most of the times we have seen it's usually a communication communication error that is happening generally. Let's say you didn't tell the team to hey, our API versions are updated, so you need to update. So things like that are the most common issues. So probably you set up a process around that to next time if you upgrade a version, that notification is sent to the different teams. So but every bit of this is always you get these results or these drills only after you have that document which has that entire information in place. So and you can sort of add those action items also, maybe like a short-term action item or long-term action item, and that really helps. And the other part is to follow this up. So like you create these documents, you probably have meetings also, but what after that, you need to sort of follow those action items also to the last bit, like until those tickets are closed. You need to follow that up, because otherwise this entire process becomes useless. So following that part to the very end is also pretty much important.
I heard a spicy take recently, and I wanna lay this on you. Every incident could have been prevented if you just had the right test.
No, I think every incident, as I would say, like most of the cases that we have seen is usually the communication part. Like that's the most common thing that we have observed. I think like I remember a case like Terraform has a lot of issues. Everyone kind of has a different story to it, but
no argument here.
No argument. So we one time what we saw is like if we update the security groups via Terraform, what AWS was doing was it removes the security groups first. Like let's say if I want to add a security group, it removes the security group first, the existing one, and then it adds the list. Even though I'm adding up just one group, for example, as an example. Now what happened was in the meantime, when it's removing those security groups, service was down. Like the service was down for let's say 2-3 minutes. Now this is something that we kind of that happened to our team, and that's a potentially ticking bomb which can actually happen anytime across any teams. So even if we just communicate hey, this is what we have seen, this is what we had experienced, And if we just relay to all the engineering teams, that issue would not occur. So that's usually the cases we have seen. Like even if the communication is proper, I'd say like 60 to 70% of the times the incidents won't occur.
I still can't get over the fact that Terraform does that by default. Like, it seems like something that no one in their right mind would have designed, to have the default be first delete all of the resources and then recreate them. I mean, that just seems backwards to me. Like, isn't the common wisdom in operations to, okay, first we'll create the new things, make sure that it works, and then switch over to it? Why is the default delete? I don't know. I maybe I just need enough coffee or something, and it will just magically, insight will come to me.
Maybe that's an AWS thing. We don't know. Like, I don't remember.
No, because like CloudFormation and CDK and everything like that, it's just the order in which the SDK is being executed. There's no fundamental reason why it has to be that way.
I want to come back to your spicy take, Warren. Every outage could be eliminated or avoided with the right test. I mean, I think in theory that's true, but the practical steps of executing that make it not the right answer for a lot of people. But I think it does highlight something that I don't think I've ever talked about in terms of incident response with anyone before, and that's identifying what your risk tolerance is. Because for a lot of companies, having some downtime is really not a big deal. In other companies, it is a big deal. Like, I worked for a while in a medical company where downtime for us meant that patients could potentially die. So we were kind of risk averse there. But in other places, I worked for a company that built a fitness app. If we were down, somebody had to figure out how to use the treadmill on their own. I think they're going to be okay. But like in those
that could be life or death, though. Also,
yeah, but in those two extremes, there's a different risk tolerance for how much downtime you're willing to take, and I think that is probably something that maybe needs to be talked about more by companies when deciding how much downtime we want.
Yeah, I mean, my bag's down every weekend.
All right.
I think in both. I think even in the downtime, as well as I think it brings to a point also about alert fatigue or on-call fatigue. Like, people kind of have very lower thresholds for a lot of things, and over the time they realize like probably we don't need a lot of lower thresholds. So I think alert fatigue generally happens when teams are starting to have their on-call process in place. They put alerts on a bunch of things, and over the time they realize, hey, like probably we don't need this alert, or that is probably not needed, or we can raise the threshold. So like in PagerDuty, we also provide these values. Like you can annotate alerts to sort of analyze and probably reduce some of the alerts that you don't even need, or you can probably increase thresholds. So similarly for probably incidents also, you can define or change your threshold values over the period of time. Some companies can afford to have incident response only during, let's say, business hours. They can afford to maybe don't do it during weekends or night times. But some companies can't afford for even a minute. So absolutely depends on company to company, type of product or type of service they provide.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same thing with like the dependabot alerts from a security standpoint, which in my domain we talk about a lot. Like how much do you want, right? Like how much is important, how much is relevant for you, and maybe the Pagerly and et al. Help you actually identify after the fact how much you have, and then to Will's point, the ROI is super critical to actually evaluate, because trying to actually sort of duplicate production in a way to actually test to see what happens at that scale at that moment, and there's no way with cloud providers to well practice what does capacity constrained look like in that environment. I mean, if you're capacity constrained because there isn't another bare metal device available, there's no there's no alternative. We should be multi-cloud provider. Like, it's never the answer.
Yeah. I mean, you can have backup DRs also. You can have as much redundancy as possible, but like there's no sort of answer end to it.
Yeah, there's some things like actually pick what your SLO is going to be, what your objective is going to be for uptime or incidents, and then make sure your strategy actually includes that and handles it, and then measure it based off of the number of incidents you get, rather than saying, oh yeah, we should know when the memory goes above 90%, because then it's bad, apparently.
Yeah. I think it always, gets updated. It always gets, with the time, it probably your product is growing, your customers are growing, so it kind of get updated with every passage of time.
So what's your top tips for someone who is not satisfied with their current incident response program or software?
I would say like I think the entire pipeline, I think like you can always see different parts to it. First part is the how easily your team or anyone is able to report the incident. So yes, you have automated alerts on DBs or from EC2s and all those parts, but let's say not everything can be automated. You need to have correct way of reporting issues. So if you have customer support, or if you have a product team, or let's say someone even if let's say if you have dev environments or pre-prod environments, you want to report issues there, you need to have a good way of reporting that, and have a process that the issue is reported to the correct team as quickly as possible. So time to trigger the incident, or time to you call that on call should be as quickly as possible. So identify the blockages in that. There can be blockages in setting this process also. And the other part is, let's say once the incident has been triggered or created, what to do. So if you feel like, if the on calls feel like a lot of work outside mitigation, if they feel like if every time you are having an incident, if you are just running around and probably adding calling people and just figuring out, hey, what's the status, or adding other team on calls all the time, figure out these kind of blockages in your processes and try to streamline as much as possible, so that like on call or whoever is other stakeholders can focus on solving as much as possible. If you want to have like if that is still like taking a lot of time, maybe set up like a team of an IMOC person who is actually handling all the incidents, and he or she is actually dispatching the incidents to the correct team and doing like a supervision of the entire process. And the last part is to see whether are you doing the postmortems correctly, like are you doing it at all or not? Are you actually learning learning from your incidents? Have your repeated incidents have reduced over the time or not? I say like that's the most material. A lot of companies kind of focus on MTTR. I think that's not probably the right metric. The right metric is to see how many unique incidents you are getting. I think if that is fine, that's fine. But if you're getting the repeated incidents time after time, something which would have avoided, then their incident response process is like the postmortem process is good in that sense.
That's interesting.
Oh, yeah, it's a good point.
I mean, I really wonder how many, like, are people hitting the same incident over and over again? Like, my guess would be probably not exactly, but maybe correct categorization would really help spill it. Like, is it the same part of your framework, code base, or component? If you have even a monolith and not microservices, you still have broken out components. You can at least target it down to, is it the same component that's causing the problem all the time? As far as a place to look and invest in, rather than, it's just something happening within our whole system. Right.
Like, I think, or maybe, did the on-call have the run book for when he was solving an incident? Do they had the right tools for, just seeing, or probably the particular service doesn't even have a dashboard, or doesn't have any playbook so that which can help on-call. So there are, like, I think a lot of learnings which any org or any engineering team can do, and see, how much. Like I think at the end, it's all about how much we can help the on-call person as much as possible. So, yeah.
I mean, if we're seeing the same incident over and over again, we should at least be able to brag about our mean time to resolution decreasing, because everybody instantly knows which service to restart.
But maybe that's a good point, though, right? Maybe that's the whole point, right? Like you don't want to have that actually decreasing, because
right.
then there's like, it really points to a different problem. It's like if you have run books, you must be because you hit the same problem over and over again.
Yeah.
And so rather than having the run book, it'd be better to eliminate where the source of the problem is coming from.
Right. And that's why I think there's a very, I'm saying not I think there's always divided opinion on, whether how good is a MTTR metric. Do you actually want to trust on it? Because it's usually counterintuitive. If you see, as you rightly said, let's say a company has resolved most of the incidents, they have resolved it to the correct point, let's say in 6 months of time. In the seventh month, the engineering team doesn't have the same incidents or similar incidents, but they have only one new incident, which kind of took a long time because that was a unique incident. So in that case, the MTTR is too big because a new incident came with a lower frequency, lower number of times, but it took a longer time. But can we say that the engineering team had a bad state of incidents hygiene? No, because they had kind of resolved most of the incidents that have occurred in the past, and those are not occurring now. This is a new one. So that's why I think MTTR is always not the right metric to see in terms of incident hygiene.
Yeah, I think the error budget, according to your SLO, is a much better one in this regard. Unfortunately, yeah, but I'm totally with. I mean, I think that all the door metrics sort of have that problem in a way. If you measure them purely or just in general, rather than how they're actually relevant. I remember working with one company that they were measuring even cycle time, but they were using feature flags and not including that in the cycle time. So I'm like, yeah, your code's going to production, but no one's using it. So what's the point? What's the point? I mean, also measure the cycle time on feature flag removal. That's going to tell you a lot more about your success.
Right. I think we have seen a lot of tools on Dora also. We have seen a lot of tools on maybe just how many commits you have pushed. So I think everything has to be read with a lot of context, with a lot of nuances also, not just the number as it because it can change based on the different kind of things that are happening.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to the limit on the time that you've got with us today. Maybe there's some last words, and then we can move over to picks. Anything you want to share?
No, I think this was pretty cool. I think with Pagerly also we have seen a lot of different and unique cases. And it's good. This is something which is very close to what we have seen, what we have felt, and it's been good to help companies to sort of streamline this entire process as much as possible.
It's got to be super interesting too to see how companies' incidents actually look like.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we have realized is every company needs their kind of every company has different processes, probably because of the state of their product, the state of their org size, and what we have always ensured is whatever your process or whatever you feel is the most apt, will not force a tool on that. We'll adapt to your kind of processes. We'll just make it more automated and more streamlined, because we know you have set up some way. Even your engineering team is being set up in a certain way, and we know the sort of some of the bits and pieces of it. So there's no one particular way of doing things, but whatever it may be, we'll help you with that.
Well said. Well said. So what do you think, Will? Should we do the picks?
Let's do some picks.
Okay. I know you put me on the spot anyway, so I'll just go first. My pick for today's session is a book called Radical Focus by, I think it's Christina Wadke. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a hypothetical story about how to actually set priorities using OKRs or KPIs or whatever, MBI, whatever you want to call them, honestly, and how not to do it and lessons learned from that. It's super relevant no matter what level you're at, realistically, like even at the team level. It's super interesting to think about like how many priorities and what should our focus be and how to think about that. Because I've seen so many teams, so many companies have like, oh yeah, we have 10 initiatives for this quarter. And I'm like, you can't, I bet your engineers couldn't even tell you 5 of them. Like, it's just too many. And I think it's a great story about how to actually think about this and what's relevant. So highly recommended.
Dude, your picks are always so relevant. I feel like mine are just like, but yours are like, oh wow, that could actually work and be helpful.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm being lazy by picking easy things. I don't. Well, you know, when I'm year 2 of a host here, maybe I'll run out of things, and then I'll be on to the I don't know, my weights that I've got in my other room that I'm using.
All right, Falit, what'd you bring for us for a pick today?
A couple of things. One I've seen like a documentary recently, which was on how Toyota built stuff, and one of the things was pretty interesting. I'm forgetting what they call it, but essentially what they say is, and the Toyota is like known for its like building bug-free products. Always
lean manufacturing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that they have always is like no matter where their manufacturing units are, no matter where what they say, if there is an issue, it gets reported to the topmost tier, immediately, like with proper clarity, and that's how I think like communication becomes so much important, and like that kind of solves a lot of things. So like I think, and it's just very fascinating how kind of they build products.
They actually have these like cords on the manufacturing floor called andon lines that they'll pull. Immediately stop the whole manufacturing line at once. Yes. No more pull requests at this moment for the whole company because there's something critically wrong going on. Like, could you imagine?
Yeah. I think andon line I was referring to, and that's super. I think that's such a simple kind of technique that any company can sort of have, like such a simple process, but very effective.
Yeah, one of my customers was a company that provided seats to Toyota, and it was wild because they would get orders like, okay, we need 317 seats that are beige delivered at 10:27 a.m. Like the level of specificity, because they have that just-in-time manufacturing. They're like, we need these at 10:27 a.m. And this was a smaller company, so like the level of pressure for them to meet those requirements was just through the roof.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense too if you think about it, because they see inventory storage as a waste, as a cost to them, and so they don't want to have it stored anywhere. You're the inventory for them, So they're going to the shelf and they're pulling it, and you are that shelf for them.
Yeah,
no, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like we were talking about this before we started recording about how my picks are just kind of out there. I feel like this one is going to be, unlike the crazy scale, this one's going to be hard to top. And yeah, I'll just get to it. So I read this book. I just finished it up a couple of days ago, called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by a guy named John Marco Allegro. And I would be tempted to call bullshit on the book right away, except for the fact that this guy spent 15 years deciphering the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so if you're not familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's a set of scrolls that were found in Egypt, I believe, in the 1940s that were thousands of years old, and they contain some parts of the New Testament Bible, but they also had other stories in there as well that weren't included in there. And so he deciphered them. But this book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, he basically goes through this book showing or arguing that a lot of the stuff written in the Old Testament and the New Testament and some other religious books as well were not factual based, but they were actually like a play on words referencing psychedelic mushrooms, and that the whole religion is based on an ancient cult or ancient culture that worshipped psychedelic mushrooms. And it's a wild read, man. It's very hard to read because of all the references he makes to like the Aramaic and the Semitic languages. But the big takeaway for me was, you know, you're reading through this and he's like, oh, well, they said this thing, and that's actually the, you know, the ancient Sumerian word for this psychedelic mushroom. And like everything points back to being the name of a psychedelic mushroom. And I was like, dude, how is it that we know so little about the ancient Sumerians, but you know the 400 different words they had for psychedelic mushrooms? But then at the end of this book, there's like a chapter. I couldn't figure out who wrote this last chapter because it wasn't John Allegra. It was someone else. But the guy was talking with his wife. She was from Russia, and they came across a field with a bunch of mushrooms, you know, and he's like, he was an American. He's like, no, don't eat those. They're all poisonous and stuff. And she's like, no, this one's this, this, and this. And so it turns out in Russian, they have like an endless number of words for mushroom. But in the U.S. and in Western cultures, we have, you know, like 3 like toadstools, mushrooms, and whatever else. So
that's a European thing, because people actually go pick mushrooms here, and so knowing which ones are poisonous. So the same thing, you know, once I moved here, I learned all about that. But I think you've memed yourself, Will, because now I see, instead of, you know, just this, but instead of aliens, now it's mushrooms, right? Like that's
was it aliens the last one? Like.
No, it's the guy from the Ancient Aliens TV show with the big hair. If you've ever seen that meme,
there's the History Channel. There's Ancient Aliens, and yeah, it's like the pyramids are landing platforms for aliens. And you know, Will's here, you know, trying to sell us on the fact that
okay, got it.
The religious cult is of mushrooms. I mean,
yeah,
good read. I added it to my list, so thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me know when you get through it. I'd be interested to talk through that with you, because there's like some parts of it you're like, okay, I see how you can get to that conclusion, and there's other parts where you're like, come on.
So is it like pretty like famous kind of book? Like, is it like?
It was written. I think it's recently. It was published in 1970. So it's an older book. And then he got a lot of hatred, and supposedly it was very detrimental to his career. Go figure.
Oh, yeah.
Who would have thought that, you know, claiming Jesus was a psychedelic mushroom would be detrimental to your career? But anyway, but I think it's gained in popularity over the last couple of years just because of the shift in the things that we're seeing, at least here in the Western world, where people are kind of changing their opinion and approach to things like to natural medicines like psychedelic mushrooms, and you know, the legalization of pot. And now in Oregon and Colorado, there's actually decriminalized centers for using mushrooms to treat like PTSD and memory issues and things like that.
You're really close to Canada, where that's been a huge topic in the last 5-10 years.
Yeah. So I think that's been a key to the book gaining new popularity.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. So now the challenge is on next week. What am I going to come with a pick that tops Jesus as a mushroom?
I actually saw one movie which is on my mind is Inside Out 2. I saw, I think, last night, and I think it blew me up. I think if someone wants to, like, I highly recommend watching. Like, I think you can sort of feel a lot of emotions from the movie. That is something which is like just on my mind freshly.
And what was the name of that one?
Inside Out, the second part.
Inside Out?
Yeah.
Awesome. And with that done, I think we have an episode. Philippe, thanks for joining us, man. This has been a blast. Really appreciate having you on the show.
It's been great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think same as I think it's been really great. Had a wonderful time just to chat about incidents and a lot of other things and sharing each other's personal experiences. I think this is something like every on call, or even every developer has their own personal experience what they want to share. So it's been a really good chat.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you again. And to all the listeners, thank you for listening. Appreciate y'all. And be sure and hit us up if there's anything we can do for you. And we'll see y'all next week.